Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. The scheduled start time is 10 o'clock, and 10 o'clock it is, so we will get going. My name's Andrew Watson. I'm the Bid Training and Consultancy Manager here at Proactis Tenders Direct, and I'll be guiding you through the wonderful journey of the tools and templates to win more tenders for the next 45 minutes to 1 hour this morning. Thank you very much for joining. We are hurtling towards a record webinar attendance. This is actually the most registered, the most subscribed webinar we've ever done, and that's, I've been in post for more than 4 years, so it's really amazing. We've obviously struck a chord with the good tendering people of the UK and beyond in terms of what you're looking for, so hopefully we'll be able to provide some value across the session this morning. We're going to dive into some tools and templates, and then of course the hook, the grab to get you in, guys. We're going to send out the templates to you after the webinar in the coming couple of days to make sure you've got them to hand as a thank you for attending, and also so you can start putting into practice some of the things that we'll be talking about across the course of the webinar. Hopefully you can, hopefully, or maybe not so hopefully, you'll be able to see my face as we're going through on the camera. Hopefully you can see the slides, and hopefully you can hear me. It always does get asked a question around about recordings, but yes, you will get a link to the recording for this session to have a review, and I'll flag some points that I think are worthwhile kind of focusing on and maybe kind of revisiting in your own kind of leisure time as we're going through the slide deck. There's a question function as well, guys. It's the 21st century. Drop the questions through the question function, the chat function. I will try and pick up some of these as we're going through the session. There are literally hundreds of people on the webinar this morning, so hopefully I'll try and look at as many questions as I can, but I might not be able to get through them all. We will try and reach out to everyone after the webinar as much as possible and make sure that we are dealing with any inquiries, etc., and kind of picking up on stuff, making sure you're feeling supported into the future. If anyone has had the pleasure and or misfortune of attending any of my webinars before, you know I love a good poll, guys. You know I love a poll, and today is no exception. So let's start with a poll just to see that we're all awake, we're all fired up for early doors in a Thursday morning, that our mouses are working. Let me have a look and get this fired up. So I'm distributing a poll right now. What's your biggest challenge in tendering? What do you think, guys? Let's have a look. Let's take a little bit of a temperature check on the people, on you good people that are on the webinar this morning, and see where we are, see how diverse the issues that we are. And this is my colleague's fantastic idea. What we'll do is the things that come up as the most important ones, the ones that people are talking about most frequently. Do you know what we might do? We might just design one of the next future webinars to sort of try and address the biggest challenge that you have, because we're that nice. We're that nice to you. We'll try and have a look and see what we can do to try and provide some support based on what's coming up the most frequently. Never 100% in terms of what you can see on the screen. I've got a feeling maybe it doesn't show in terms of the results for everyone. That's probably long enough. Like everyone's voted, everyone's awake. I'm loving it, guys, absolutely loving it. The most pressing point is a lack of experience. That's actually what 40% of people said was the biggest concern. So that's maybe an area we can say, okay, well, when we do have a lack of experience, how do we try and address that into the future? And the next biggest one on 22% was knowing what the buyer really, really wants. Which hopefully some of the stuff we'll cover today will actually help with, but we can also be thinking about future webinars to try and support that as well. So thank you very much, really high level of participation. Let's get going. Let's get going. Let's close that poll down. Thank you very much. Hopefully we're back on the slides and we can get started. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think that's everyone now being able to see my slides again. Very much hope so. Okay. So back on the slides. Thank you. I have a mole. I have a mole from my organisation who's keeping me on track. Thank you, Alistair, keeping me from going astray. In case any of my tech application goes awry, it is user error. Okay, this is what we're going to cover across the course of the session. It's important to think of this. What we're not doing is we're not trying to turn everyone into bid experts. We're not really talking about every single point of the process along a bidding response. Okay, we've picked out some of the key templates that we think are underused in our experience dealing with clients that we think might support, and we'll provide those and have a bit of a chat around those so that you know kind of, okay, this is how I can start thinking about using these. First one, we're going to think about making smart and informed bid no bid decisions. How are we doing that just now in our organisations? How do we do it better? And there's a simple template to support us with that. How do we analyse document packs properly and pull out and address all of the requirements that are within those? This is a really big one, and loads of people get this half-baked, that biscuit, okay, and it has impacts on the scoring. We're going to talk about thinking about end-to-end planning of our response. How do we do that? How do we think about what we put in certain parts of a response? And then how do we think about individual answer responses as well? How do we make sure we're doing a good process in terms of reviewing and refining our draft answers to make sure they are on point? And we'll also have a little bit of time for a Q&A, hopefully at the end, if I stay on track, if I stay on time and don't do too much waffling. I know you're already thinking it's going to be difficult for you, Andrew, but I'll try my best. I should say I kind of didn't really do an introduction myself. Apart from saying I'm the bid training and consultancy manager here at Proactus. I did mention I've been in post for a bit over 4 years, and my job is all about helping organisations do the very best they can in terms of the outcomes they get whenever they put bids in. So improving their own capabilities to do that, and also providing them with one-to-one support as they need to make sure they land the most important bids. Okay, so I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of bids. I've seen them all, the good, the bad, the ugly. So you have a good idea as to what works and what doesn't. I made a beautiful, well, I say beautiful, I created a little pyramid. Probably worth just having a little look at this. How do we think about this? When I get questions, a lot of this, a lot of the registration questions were around how do I bid well? How do I get top marks? How do I score? How do I win? If you think about it, building up layers, okay? So we need to think about building up the layers to get to great answers. And the pyramid is designed to show the different kind of component parts. You might want to reorder them, you might think of them differently, but these are all the things that we build and build and build upon to get to the top, which is full marks for our answers, okay? If we don't have any of these levels within our pyramid, we're not going to get to the top, okay? We're going to have a cap on how good our scores can be. And the templates that we're going to talk about across the course of this webinar are designed to support us to make sure we do all these things so that we get to the top of the pyramid and we score full marks, okay? We need to do things like compliant. We need to address basic requirements. What else do we need to do? We need to make sure we're fully addressing all the requirements and tailoring our responses to the scoring criteria that's been laid out before us. We need to provide compelling evidence. We need to have a strong customer focus based on research and understanding. Our response needs to be strategically coherent. It needs to be written in an active, persuasive, stylish way. It needs to be designed properly, laid out properly in such a way as to make it appealing and easy to read, and that our key messages get across. If you take away one of these levels, we're very unlikely to get to close to full marks, okay? So we need to think about doing this each and every tender that we have. Can we honestly say it? We tick all of these boxes, we reach all of these levels, we get to the top of the pyramid. Like I said, some of the tools are to try and support us. We need to think of bidding as a process. We need to think about what the stages and kind of planning out are, and think about going all the way through these different stages, okay? And again, if we're not following these stages, if we try and circumvent, skip some of them, then it will have an impact on our results and our performance overall. So it starts with, there's earlier stages to this, but for simplicity's sake, talk about making sure we choose the right opportunity, really nailing in what all of the requirements are for us to be successful in terms of response, planning out our response, so planning out how we're going to spend our time between the starting point and the deadline, as we usually have, developing strategy, how do we make sure we're doing that properly and that gets incorporated within our response, how do we make sure that the plan that we've generated and created is being communicated to the relevant people within the organisation, and are we project managing that process? Each bid is a project to manage. Are we project managing that process through to completion each and every time? You might not think of these in the kind of linear way that they're sort of numbered there, and they're going to be some more kind of complementary, running in parallel, etc. Just a high level way of thinking. We need to do all of these things within our process to make sure we've got the best opportunity to be successful. Okay, so I just wanted to set a little bit of a sort of a framework and a way of thinking at this kind of helicopter overview type approach before we then go into this template, this template, this template, which is what we're going to go into now. Okay. Again, one of these points where it's just worth capturing, you know, people can take screenshots, that kind of thing. You're going to get recordings anyway. So thinking about how do we go about doing go, no go decision processes within our organizations. I've worked with some organizations that have quite robust, written down, formalized processes for how they go about deciding whether to pursue opportunities or not. But in reality, the majority of organizations, it is quite ad hoc, it is quite informal, and it's very kind of emotionally driven, and it's not necessarily particularly clear that we've got great reasons for deciding to pursue an opportunity or deciding not to pursue an opportunity. Okay, so if you're answering these questions as an organization, and I know there are quite a lot of guys on the call that are, you know, relatively early stage in terms of bidding experience, so you might be like, well, I definitely don't have any of this stuff. That's okay, but if you can start getting processes in place from an early stage, it's really important then that you do that so that you start making the right results. There's a thing other people, you guys will know about, a lot of you will know about, you know, where it's there can be an amplification of errors. So if you make an error at the start about which opportunity to pursue or not to pursue, if you think about that can amplify in terms of I'm spending a lot of time pursuing an opportunity that I never should. If I'd got that right at the start, I would have saved days and days of work pursuing an opportunity that actually wasn't a good fit. Likewise, if I do it the other way around, I could have actually missed a really good opportunity that could have significant kind of commercial and or strategic implications for us as an organization. So it's really important to nail this. So as an organization, how do you decide things? Is it a group decision? Is it one person? How do you authorize it? Is there an exception procedure if you want to pursue something that you don't think meets the levels you need it to? The decisions and outcomes of the bid that you've pursued, does that have an impact? Does that feed back in to your go, no go decision process? Okay. What I'm going to do is after the webinar, we're going to share the template that we've got. It's like a kind of fairly standard looking template with some of the sort of standardy questions you might want to ask as part of a go, no go decision. What I would suggest is you're going to have to think then about, okay, well, how fit for purpose are these for us as an organization? Are there other questions that we would want to be asking here? How do we feel about how these questions are scored, weighted? What's going to be appropriate for us? So there's some example questions up on the screen there, and I'll actually bring up the Excel that we're going to be sharing as well really shortly as well. But the idea is you're kind of formalizing it. You've got some form of track to say these are the questions we asked about an individual specific opportunity. These were the answers, i.e. are they yes, no, are they scored? And then this was an aggregated score against that opportunity as we've assessed it just now within our go, no go. How does that score then, what does that score mean we should do? Does it mean we need to think about this a bit more, investigate it more? Does it mean it should be a definite no? Or does it mean it should be a definite yes, and we should be thinking about pursuing the opportunity? So within the template that I'm going to be sharing, there's going to be some instructions to use, and then there's going to be the list of questions. I think probably the list of questions on this slide are too small for you to see, I'm going to guess, but there they are there. What I would typically do is maybe I'd have some questions that would usually apply when I'm asking within my own organization, and then I might have some there might be some extra questions that I want, some additional questions that I want to be thinking about. I want to maybe think about adding them in. Are there opportunity specific questions I want to be thinking about as well? Are some of the questions in the standard list not relevant? You would answer sort of yes, no, and then it would give you like a score based on it. So the template will do that for you based on how many questions you've got and how many you've answered yes to, how many you've answered no to. It will give you a score to then allow you to go, okay, well that's a good score. If it's more yeses, obviously higher score, more likely that we should pursue it. No score, lower, therefore less likely we should pursue it. With that in mind, it's important to think about, okay, well, I'm not just giving you the template and saying this is absolutely how you should run with it. What you should be doing is thinking about, okay, should I adjust the questions that are on it? Should I be adding ones in? Are there some of these that aren't relevant to me? The idea with this is that, put this bit in here, look at this sentence. After completion in a few sentences, summarize the reasons why we should pursue this opportunity, including why we have a good chance of success. So really simple, but if we've answered these yes/no questions, if we're getting more yeses than nos, it should be relatively simple for us to then do a summary of that in a few lines of narrative and say, you know, the reasons we're pursuing this are because we're one of a very, very select number of suppliers who can fully meet the specifications that have been laid out. We know from previous experience we're highly competitive on price versus others. We have a detailed and in-depth relationship with the buyer and are able to respond to points that aren't captured within the specification. That's sounding a bit best case scenario, I know, but these are the type of things we want to be capturing. If we've captured all this good stuff, then it's really clear, okay, we're all really clear on why, and actually that's a starting point for thinking about, we need to make sure that this type of information, the reasons why we've captured it, are there ways that we've made sure that that's reflected actually in our response in terms of how we've thought to construct that, and also the type of things that we've included within individual answers. So have we mirrored back the reasons why we think we would be successful? Has that found a way into our actual responses? Also, you know, in terms of just having that little bit of protection, we can then go, okay, well, everyone's agreed, this is the scoring, these are the reasons that we've captured in these sentences, and that can be, you know, shared and collated by, you know, and looked at by sort of senior management within an organization. Therefore, you've all got that agreement, and we all collectively said, yeah, this is worth pursuing because of this, this, and this. It also helps to kind of crystallize if there's reasons why, you know, we don't think there's a good opportunity to pursue. We don't think that you could easily use that as a box to capture in a few sentences. If you're not going to pursue it, we're not going to pursue this opportunity because we have no existing relationship with the buyer. We are not able to meet all of the specification points required for the solution. We know there are others in the market who have much more more readily available, suited solutions than we do that we struggle to compete with on price. Okay, sounds like an opportunity we're maybe not going to pursue. But having that capturing that information, it's good to have it on record and to make sure that it gives people the opportunity to be aligned and to have that visibility within the organization. Okay, so it's an important point. Don't take it as is, adjust it, make it your own. Some organizations, when they get a little bit more sophisticated, what they would maybe want to do is they maybe want to weight the individual questions, and then they'd want to be scoring the individual questions as well. So like, how far along on a scale of 1 to 10, how strong is our solution, for example? And then you can have those aggregated and it can give you a score. So a little bit of readjusting the template. I didn't want to do that because sometimes it's a bit too complicated for ones that are relatively new, but this would be a good starting point. But over time, you might want to think about, I want to weight the questions differently, and I want to be able to score the questions rather than just answer them yes, no, and have that all kind of aggregate into to give us our 1% score, to then give us our kind of standard position as to whether or not we should pursue an opportunity. Hopefully that's simple. And like I say, obviously we will be sharing the template so you can work with that. Okay. Next bit. Next template. We're going at a pace, guys. We're going at a pace. We're not going to be, you know, you're going to want to, when these templates come through to you, you're going to want to spend a little bit of time thinking about them. You might want to revisit the recording with the template up in front of you just to make sure you're capturing all the pieces of information that you need from it. Okay. Okay. So next point is around analysing the documentation and making sure we address all the requirements. A simple way to think about things. This is of the tools that we're going to talk about, of the 4 tools that we've got to discuss across the webinar. This is the one that is, unless it's people that are quite experienced, this is the one that organizations typically don't use. They typically haven't heard of it. They will sometimes do some of the activities around it in a less sort of formal or process way. And it's the one that can add an awful lot of value if we're not, okay? So we're thinking about a tool that helps us in a number of different ways, okay? So we need to think about all of the things that I have to do or we have to do for a compliant bid, okay? And I guess the guys that have, unless you've not done any bids, you might know what I mean by that. So we know we've got to fill in number of answers, we've got to fill in a certain number of documents, we might have to provide attachments, we might have to answer questions directly on a portal, we might have to upload things. There's going to be a mix of the more substantial things that we've got to do, i.e. the things that are going to be scored and assessed, and we know there's more kind of the administrative type things that aren't necessarily directly scored, but we need to include them and respond to them for our bid to be compliant. So there might be things like non-collusion form, okay? There's not a lot to that. We have to check we're comfortable with the wording on it, and then we have to sign and upload it. Form of tender, acceptance of terms and conditions, these type of things. I'm not saying there shouldn't be some work in the background to make sure you're okay with them. We don't sign things blind, or at least we shouldn't. I know a lot of people do, but in terms of the action that we have to take to complete it, it's relatively straightforward. We just have to sign it, we have to upload, answer a raft of questions. So that's, if we think of that as one bucket of things that we've got to do within our within the overall response, so that we are able to submit a compliant response, okay? There's another bucket of things that we can do. They're not always that, it's not always that clear cut in terms of the distinction, but there will be a whole raft of things that they are asking for our solution to do. So what do they want? What are they trying to procure? What is it that's required for our solution to address? So this could be things that are captured. There could be like a separate specification document. It could be there's a particular section within the ICT document itself, or it could be any number of different configurations. The other thing to bear in mind on that point is that there will be, or there can be, things scattered out throughout any part of the documentation that they've provided that can relate to either things I have to do for a compliant bid or things they're asking for our solution to do, okay? So there might be a whole raft of specification points within a specification document or section, but that's not necessarily all of the things that they're looking for a solution to do. There might be a little bit scattered about random paragraphs where they're saying your solution must do this, it must do this, it must do this, okay? So what we need to do, if you think about it, what we need to do to make sure our response is both compliant and that we have the give ourselves the opportunity to address all the things they're looking for us, our solution to do, we have to look through all of the documentation and we have to pull out all of that information. Okay, we have to pull out all of it whenever they ask for anything like that. Okay. So there's a very simple Excel template that we can use to help us with both of these things. Okay. Now, typically when I speak to organizations, you guys are doing one version. You're doing all the things I have to do for a compliant bid. In one way or another, you're capturing that. So sometimes you'll get a bid and the procurement guys, the people that have structured it, will very nicely give us somewhere in the documentation a little table, and it will say your response needs to include this document, this document, this document, this form, this form, this form, etc., etc. And it will give you a really explicit list to say these are all the things that you need to do to submit a compliant bid. Other times they won't do that. Either way, what it's good practice to do is have something called a compliance matrix, which is basically listing all of the requirements that we need to put back, all the things we need to do within our response for it to be accepted, for it to be compliant. So all of the questions we have to answer, all of the documents we have to upload, all of the things we've got to sign and return, all of the questions we've got to answer directly in the portal, etc., etc. So we can use a compliance matrix to make sure we've captured that and we're tracking to make sure all of those actions are being done, and we can tick them off as they've been done and as they're re-uploaded onto the portal. So we've got a track, and we make sure we don't get to a situation where we submit and then we get a comment back from the authority saying you didn't submit this document that was requested of you, therefore your bid's non-compliant, therefore we're not going to score it. Now, I've never been involved in a bid personally where we've had that come up, but I know lots and lots of organizations where that has come up as an issue, okay? So we need to make sure we're extracting all of the requirements to make our bid compliant, and we're tracking to make sure we're responding to all of those as part of our project management, okay? In terms of all the things that we're looking for the solution to do, then that's a little bit more complicated, or a little bit more to think about there, okay? So I would call that, or typically that's called your response matrix. So the template that we'll be sending out it's got different tabs on it, and I'll explain those. It's got a compliance matrix tab, which is all the things we need to reply with for our bid to be compliant, and a response matrix tabs, which says these are all of the things they're asking for our solution to do, and have we responded to those, okay? So compliance matrix, I think, should be pretty straightforward, should be pretty clear. The response matrix, like I say, is a little bit more to think about. What you would do is basically you go through the documentation that's been provided, okay, and you have to go through it end to end, because there can be things that they're asking for your solution to do anywhere within the document pack that they've provided. And what you want to do is you basically want to pull out any requirements that you find around what they want your solution to do, and have that as an individual line on that response matrix Excel sheet. Okay, you want to capture where it is within the document pack, i.e. which document, which section, which page number it's on, what the requirement is, and we're talking about at the most granular level. So it could be there's a sentence somewhere that covers 3 different things, because sometimes they write in more complex sentences, 3 different things that your solution has to do. Okay, what you want to do is you'd want to break that sentence down into 3 component parts, and each one of those parts is going to have its own row within the response matrix. Okay. So if you go through the documentation, I would highly suggest to do this in your next bid, and from then on, if you go through the documentation and do this exercise, what you'll quickly get to is you will get to, you will see that you'll populate this with dozens of lines. What's the point in doing this? Hopefully it's clear. If we don't do this, typically what people do is they'll go through either online on their computer or with a hard copy and start highlighting stuff, highlighting sections. They go, I need to respond to that. I need to make sure we talk about that within our solution. We need to talk about that. But the problem with doing it that kind of way is there is no mechanism to make sure that the bits that you've highlighted make it into the response. Okay, there's no mechanism to make sure that those are captured, that those are addressed, and that we then know whether or not they've been responded to across our response, okay? So if we don't do this exercise where we kind of pull them out and go line by line by line, it can be something as simple as, it could be asking about, there could be different aspects to our contract management reporting. It could be them saying, you need to have a meeting every quarter. That's one requirement. It could be that it could be the suite of KPIs that you have to report on. Okay, that's another requirement. It could be the time frame for implementation. It could be a technical aspect of the solution. It needs to integrate with X system. These are all, like individual level things that we need to capture. If we've captured them all row by row by row by row by row in our response matrix, we've then got the opportunity to say, okay, given the amount of time we've got to respond, the amount of space we've got to respond, all of the quality answers, do we want to address that head on, how we will respond to that requirement? Okay. And if we do, where within our response, which answer, which section, which answer are we going to address it in? If you don't do this, then it's very straightforward. It's very easy for something to be missed. And then the comments, when you get your feedback, when you've been unsuccessful, will be, well, you didn't talk about this. You didn't address this part for our specification. Why didn't we? Well, We didn't really think to put that in our answer. If we do this exercise, what we're then able to do is to say, okay, these are all the points they've asked for. I want to refer to these in my solution, where I can start going, okay, I'm going to talk about that point with an answer number 4. I'm going to talk about this point with an answer number 7. I'm going to talk about this point with my answer number 8. And I can also make sure and use this as a reference to go, it's going to help me with that individual answer planning. And it's also going to act as a reference for me to go back and check and say, let's double check and check off that we did address that point within that answer. So it's a check to make sure our answers are as comprehensive as we want them to be. You might make a decision that there's too many points and that you're not going to be able to address them all in any detail across your entire answer piece. And that's fine if that's the decision you come to. But we shouldn't end up there by default or by not looking at them. If we're making a deliberate decision about which points we're going to cover or which ones we're not, then that's a much better situation than we just missed some things by mistake. So I'll give you an example. This is kind of one that bridges across compliance and response, but one of a line buried away in a proposal I looked at a few weeks ago, it said your proposal should include the limitations around your proposed solution design. In the response that was put together, they actually didn't talk about the limitations of the solution design. And what did the feedback come back as? The feedback came back saying, you've not made any references to you've not discussed the limitations of your solution design. If we'd done this exercise about laying this all out in a matrix, we would never have missed that point, and we would definitely have made its way back into the appropriate point within our answer. Okay. So hopefully that's kind of demonstrates the value on it. There is a little bit of time involved in creating these in terms of populating them, because you are going at a very granular level through the entire document, all the documents that have been issued, but the value you get in terms of making sure you address the right points at the right point within your responses, and to make sure you can then say, yes, we've been exhaustive, we've covered off everything, they're going to love this. It's one of these things that will bump us up that pyramid I showed earlier on. Okay, so very, very simple Excel. Obviously, I'm not taking credit for creating compliance matrix. They've been around for decades before me, but a really, really powerful tool that people that are putting bids together at a high level are using. And the ones that are, there is a cap to how good your bids can be if you're not using this or some type of equivalent, because you will miss things. Okay, I know this is going fast, guys. I know we're covering a lot of ground. Like I say, you're going to have the opportunity to review this in your own time through the recording with the templates in front of you. You're not going to feel super comfortable, I don't think necessarily, with all of these templates without having a play around with them yourselves, but do invest the time over the coming days to do that, and it will pay dividends. Okay. So I think I made reference to this, and I talked about you're thinking about the overview and thinking about the bid process kind of overall, and all the different stages we've got to do, the things that we've got to do to get good quality. One of the things that also frequently gets missed, and hopefully the last template, the response matrix, compliance matrix, you'll understand if we're doing that, why we need to then think about our overall response. Okay. So we need to think about overall responses because we need to think about a few different things. We need to think about where should we be addressing things within different answers, i.e. the points that we've pulled from our response matrix, we've pulled into our response matrix, where should we be referring to those across the different answers? We don't think about, if we just look at each individual answer completely siloed, it's impossible for us to do that piece, to go, actually, these points that we pulled out into the response matrix, they will all fit beautifully within answer number 3, and that's where we can have a section addressing them and really dive into the details to show. Okay, if we don't do the overall piece, we won't be doing that. If we don't do the overall piece, it's very difficult to think about ensuring that the bid has a coherent strategy and that we are emphasizing the themes that we want to be across the response. If we just look at every answer siloed, we don't get the opportunity to do that, to kind of stitch it together and to go, okay, well, the strategy points that we want to be emphasizing are these. the themes that we've got to support them and the evidence we've got to support them is this, this, and this. We can put some evidence in here to support this point, some evidence in here to support this point. If we look at every answer individually with blinkers on siloed, we will not do that exercise. And our answers will be poorer for it, our overall response will be poorer for it. So hopefully you can see there are a few different reasons, but how do we do that, or what's the approach to kind of to think about it as a sort of end-to-end piece? Well, the next template should help us a bit with this. So through the compliance matrix, the tabs on that, we've captured what all our requirements are to be compliant and to be responsive. We've captured them all. If we think about laying out, we've got a document that captures end-to-end all of the different quality answers that we have to submit. What we can do is then drop the appropriate requirements or specifications against the appropriate answers where we want to address them. As I mentioned before, we can then go, where do we want to incorporate appropriate win themes that we're then going to be able to evidence across our appropriate answers to emphasize the right things in the right places. And then how do we, then from there, what we can do is we can map out the structure of our individual answers based on what the question is specifically asking for. Okay. So we can get to a point where we know we've got, say, 10 questions, we've got like understanding of what the important parts to put in against those 10 questions are, what things we want to be emphasizing that are going to make our bid seem stronger across those 10 questions, and we're then able to map out the structure of the individual answers to understand where within answers we can be addressing certain things. Okay. So this is all stuff we're doing before we start drafting any narrative. So there's a work here. We front load all this work before we start drafting any individual narrative against answers, because if we start drafting before we've done stuff, again, things will get missed. We'll cap how far up the pyramid that we can go. Really simple tool, really simple template. It's gone through a few iterations. Again, you might change this over time, but if you imagine that you're going to do one of these, you can do one of these templates for every, it depends on the structure. Most commonly, you have to answer individual questions. I know sometimes some proposals or some tenders you're asked to write individual sections. It's not as rigid as question 1, question 2. You need to write a section on this, a section on this, but you can use this either a section or a question level. Really, really simple stuff. We're just going to try, and what we're trying to do is capture the key information that's going to inform our writing of this answer before we start writing this. And we want to do this for all of the answers in a combined document, so we can then have a good idea of what should go where, and then we make sure from there we're drafting the appropriate narrative for each individual answer, considering our response as a whole. So I've talked about pulling out the pieces from the response matrix, what ones you can drop those in here for the individual answer. I'm gonna address points number 22, 23, 25, 26 from our response matrix within this answer. I'm going to make sure I've got captured in front of me the criteria and the weighting of the individual one. Are there specific customer questions or issues that I want to be addressing within this answer? What are the themes that we want to be emphasizing across this answer? Make sure they're captured there as well. If I've got evidence to hand that I can drop in that I really want to make sure I'm including within this given answer. Are there pieces that I know I need to go and get, or I need to go and ask people for, etc.? Are there other documents I need to go and look at? So you might not, when on first pass this, you might not have all the information that you need, but it should act as a prompt to say, okay, I'm going to need some more evidence on this. I need to go and ask X person in a different department for the evidence that I need for this. What I would typically do is then, actually do the outline of the individual answer. So what I mean by that is mirroring the language of the question. I'm going to start structuring my headings and attribute word counts to those sections, and think about what are the subheadings I want to include, or the bullets I might want to include within those. So again, I'm not drafting any narrative. I'm doing everything else first. But if I know I've got a question, it's 1,500 words, I might think, well, based on the question, what are my different sections? What should those headings look like mirroring their language? How many words should I be spending on each of those sections? So I can map this out, and I can do this for all of the qualitative questions that are going to be assessed. Think about it as an end-to-end piece, okay? So it's getting away from the idea of looking at each question in a silo, and it's getting away from the idea of just starting writing and hoping for inspiration. So we're doing loads of structuring, we're doing loads of info gathering, making sure we've got the right things to hand, and then we're going to start drafting narrative when we've got that, as well as potentially need to go away and get extra bits of information evidence from people as well. One of the things that comes up a lot within organizations, if they're not very small, it's about how do we engage with subject matter experts? How do we get contributors to write effectively if they've got individual answers? Providing them with a populated content plan is a very good way of ensuring they have all the relevant information to hand. They understand how you think it should be structured. They understand what the themes are that they can be emphasizing, how it's important. They understand the criteria because they've got that in front of them without necessarily having to go and wade through the document pack, which 9 times out of 10 they're not going to do, and they're just going to write an answer off the top of the head that probably will veer away from ideal. Okay, you provide them with this structure, with this framework, and then they'll do it correctly. So I would be doing this for myself in each occasion, but I would also be doing it for my contributors as well, and sending them the relevant content plan for the answers that they're going to be involved in, because it will help them to stay on track, to produce good quality content, to make sure they're not deviating overly from what you need them to produce. Okay, so again, super simple template. Again, it's not something that you should take and think I've got to use it exactly as is. You might want to have something, complementary that's more around the kind of design aspect, if that's an important part based on the type of sector that you work in. You might want to change some of the wordings, you might want to tailor it, you might want to add extra things that are going to be relevant for you, okay? But it's a starter for 10. It's going to get you a lot closer to best practice in terms of thinking about things in this end-to-end way, and then going, how do I make sure I've got relevant information, the information I need, my structure thought out before I start drafting any narrative. Can't emphasize enough, if you've got a blank piece of paper, a question, and you just start writing, there will be a cap to either your score or how much you're going to have to do rewrites. You're going to limit how good your answers are if you just do that. And likewise, if you give a contributor, and I know a lot of people have done this, you say, oh, here's the question, can you knock me up 1,000 words on this, and you give them nothing else, no context, no themes to emphasize, no response, no critical points from the specification that they should be addressing within it, no focus on the evaluation criteria, etc. They're never going to get it as good, they're never going to contribute as well as if you provide them with that framework within which to make their contribution. Okay, hopefully clear. Last one, and I think this is probably the most straightforward. It's really, really simple to use. Having some form of review and editing approach built into your process. So again, we think about our overall process. A really important point about going from draft content through to final content and submission. Ideally, we want, if one person creates, reviews, edits, and submits a response, there's going to be far more likely to be errors within it, because you stop seeing them, you become kind of error blind to your own work. It's less likely to be of a high quality because other people will see things differently. So as an organization, do we allow sufficient time for reviews? Do we get other eyeballs onto projects to make sure that they're onto responses, to make sure they're of a really high standard? It's really, really important. Okay. How many reviews at what stage? How much time do you build into your timeline? When you project plan it out, as we all do, how long at the end are you building in for draft reviews? Okay. With that being said, the template can be used by the person who's drafted the answers. They can use it on their own work, and they can also, it can also be a support, a guide to someone that's reviewing that's not been familiar or that's not been involved in the drafting. Okay. So the review, the checklist that we're going to share is around the kind of high level stuff. So it's about making sure we hit all of the things that we want to within our response. Does it match up with everything that we needed? Is it doing the right things? Okay. It's the checklist doesn't capture around sort of spelling, punctuation, and so on, things like that. The sort of what we call basic or low level stuff. but we should also make sure that we do those things towards the end. And I've seen an awful lot of submissions that have been asked to review why they weren't successful, that have either layout, spelling, punctuation, grammar errors up front and center, and it does jar with the valuer. So you need to make sure you've got a process to alleviate those, and that normally means at least a different person looking at them as well. That I'm going to assume is too small. So I'll bring it up here. That's probably too small. But you want to be doing an exercise where you're answering a range of questions for each of the answers that you've put together. Again, this seems like a bit of work, but it's really, really rare that you will review your own work and you'd be able to say yes for all of these. And there's nothing that you think, actually, maybe we could do different. So it's just a way of giving you a bit of structure to these reviews, okay, guys? So it's giving you a little bit of a guidance in terms of what should we be looking for. Has it met the specifications? Is our strategy clear? Is it clearly structured? Does it look readable? Do we talk about the buyer first and us second? 90% of the responses I'm asked to review that aren't successful talk about us first and the buyer second. It is people's default way of writing. But if you've got it there as a question that you have to do as part of your review, you're like, do you know what? We've talked about us again first. Okay, we need to rewrite this. Show understanding of them, show what's important to them, show how we're a good fit for it. We talk about them first. Okay. Does it take the reader on an end-to-end journey? Does it make sense? Have we evidenced claims properly within? Maybe we could do more. Is it concise? Are we economical with words? Is there an opportunity to say what we've put here in fewer words, and then we can add a bit more detail somewhere else? Are we waffling? Are we fully aligned to the top bracket of the quality scoring criteria? The number of times that people can honestly say that are vastly the minority, okay? So again, you need to try and find a way to build into your process reviewing these answers. I know maybe you're thinking across this tool, other tools, this is going to look like an awful lot of work. It is work, but it means the actual drafting should be more straightforward. It should be closer to right first time. Okay. With this one, it's what's required. It's going to tick up marks. If you do this review and you make adjustments for it, it's going to tick up marks. At the end of the day, if we want to score really highly, we know, everyone knows there's a strong correlation between the amount of effort and time and resource that goes into bids and the results that we get out of them. So if you're looking at and you're saying, as an organization, I don't think we'll have the capacity to look and to do these reviews with another person. Okay, that's understandable, and it's a totally reasonable position to be in. But we know by not doing this, there will be a cap to the scores that we can attain. And if we do want to win, maybe we need to think about other ways to reprioritize or to do fewer bids, but do them with a higher level of effort per bid, because that's what's going to get us those top marks, and that's what's then going to get us the results to allow us to grow our businesses, etc., etc. Okay. So I would be building this into the process, ideally with multiple people to do this review, and then to have time to make the responses and make the changes based on what the no's that this comes back with. And again, it shouldn't be seen as a fixed document. It should be seen as one that you can adjust, make your own, adapt. So for example, here I've got some questions where, so you might want to have a raft of additional questions. There's going to be some that maybe don't apply to every answer. So you're going to put some no's, some don't knows or not applicables, but it's just about saying, okay, how do we get them all to be yeses? If there's don't knows, is that because we need to ask someone else what they're trying to convey there, or do we need to understand what our strategy was if we've not got that to hand while we're doing our review, etc., etc. Okay. And those are our whistle stop, or potentially should have been more whistle stop tour through the 4 templates. So, because guys, I do love it. I do love a poll. I do love a poll. Which of the templates then do you think will be of more use to you? So I'm really interested to see kind of what people think. And again, it might be something that we can dive into in a bit more detail. But I'd be really curious if you guys are happy enough to vote. If everyone's still with me, the coffee's kicked in. It's been 45 minutes. The coffee should be firing on all cylinders. We're at peak performance now. Yay. Great voting, nearly all done. Excellent. Okay, so and it might be something that we could spend a bit more time on, some of the individual pieces, but I think it's really, really good to sort of spin through them to see. Okay. So results then, because nearly everyone's voted. 10% said go, no go. 29% said the compliance matrix, 43% said the content plan, and 19% said the review checklist. So certainly content plan is the most valuable, go, no go is the least, but there's quite a lot of variation. It's quite reasonably evenly spread for the 4 options. So unless people are just doing it randomly, that's really good that there's people that can take away, the tools. And this is not, what I've not tried to do in 50 minutes is run through all of the different tools that are available. There are dozens of variations of different things, but these are the ones that I think are the most critical to give you that boost if you're not using them already, just to help you with that robust process and make sure you're ticking off all the things that you need to do. Okay, I will have a quick look at some of the questions that have come in. These are the questions that there were literally hundreds of questions asked at registration, so I just pulled out some that I thought would be relevant to discuss. But let me see what's coming live as well. What question are people not asking you that you think we should? That's really meta. I love that question. That's really cool. So I think a lot of it is to do with the template. So guys, again, if you're watching the recording, refer back to my pyramid, my trademark pyramid. It's not trademark, my trademark pyramid, where we've got those different things, and think about, okay, well, how do I make sure I get all of these levels? Do I know how to do all of these different things? And the templates that we've gone through are the ways in which are some of the ways in which to support you to make sure that you do get there. I always get asked about the recording. It will be coming to you in the next few days, so don't worry about that. Let me close the response because I don't think you can see my slides until I do that. Can you be penalised for being too far under the word limit? If there's a word limit been set, typically there are some exceptions, but typically the expectation is that is a reasonable number of words that you might want to write in your response. If there's a word limit that's 2,000 words and your answer is 500 words, there's a disconnect between the expectation from the authority, from the evaluators, and what you are providing. I would say typically we want to have so much good stuff, so much detail that we can provide about our solution, about the evidence base that we've got, about the previous work, about how we're innovative and adding value and all this type of good stuff. That normally it's about choosing what of all the good stuff we've got do we want to be incorporating within our answer. So it's an editing exercise. If we write 500 words versus 2,000 words, it's going to jar. Why have they not written more? Why have they not adhered, more closely or gotten closer to the limit that I've put on? Do you have a way of estimating how much time is required to write a bid based on the length and the complexity of the tender? Yes. So if you think about it, there has to be, because we have to make estimates about this, because if we're expected to think of this as a project, we've got a set amount of time to do that project. We need to have an understanding of what the resourcing requirements will be across that time period to understand if it's feasible and to start attributing people's time across that project while they've got other projects running on. If you think about it also, there's lots of people, other organizations such as ourselves, as well as ourselves, who are provide outsourced support for bids. What we would do is we would understand what scope of support a particular client is looking for, and then we would understand how many days of work that is likely to incorporate for a bid writer manager to come and do that process for them to do that scope of work. If we don't have any way of estimating it, then there's no way we can provide sort of fixed costs, which we do on every project. So nearly every project, there are some open-ended ones where the support is open-ended, but yes, for a given project, you need to be able to. And what's a reasonable level? Reasonable, if you're starting from scratch in terms of evaluating, going through document packs, pulling out requirements, and then finding information and then drafting content, between maybe 1,000 to 1,500 words per day of content creation is reasonable. It's a bit of a ballpark, but if you're going off something to say, if someone sat there and they're doing that kind of research, they're doing that analysis, and they're doing that writing of individual, including some rewrites. Maybe 1,000, 1,500 words per day is reasonable. You'll know as an organization for individuals, is that what I can do? Am I really dedicating a full day to doing this, an unbroken day to doing this, or am I doing other things BAU alongside it? If I'm doing other things, maybe that's not a realistic target. Okay, so you need to have a think about what's realistic, but you need to start engaging it to then understand, well, are we resourcing our bids properly? Social value, lots of questions about social value. Go onto our website, the webinar, we have a previous webinar on social value that you can reference more detail. We have a specific social value training course that lasts for an afternoon and runs on a monthly basis. That is top notch, and it's a really good sort of introductory / intermediate level approach, understanding to answer social value questions, because it is an area that a lot of businesses are finding a struggle, and it is something that's becoming increasingly more important within the responding to and the evaluation of bids. And what are the key factors that tend to differentiate winning tenders from proposals from others? I refer back to my pyramid. It's about understanding things, meeting all the requirements, pulling out all the specification, providing evidence, providing an excellent solution, evidencing it properly, having writing and layout good, content good, active, persuasive language, customer understanding research based on that, strategy formation and implication based on customers and on competitors, all that type of good stuff. None of it's rocket science. It's easier in theory than it is in practice, and it does take time and effort. Okay, guys, I think we're very close. Just the last point, just have a quick look. The resources we've got, I'm just having to spin through the question while we go through this. Yeah, there's a few things we've covered. I think a lot of the things. Character limits, just translate. So one of the questions about character limits. So you basically can convert character limits into word limits and then use those as your limits. And AI is obviously our current topic as well. So yeah, there are, it's going to increasingly become a sort of part of the process, I think, in terms of where is it that it can add help, and it can improve efficiency. I don't think we're at a point where you're going to create end-to-end bids through AI, but certainly AI can be used for the sort of to aid the research piece, and it can also be used for the kind of content creation, narrative creation as well. So there are a number of kind of general purpose and more bespoke options out there at varying degrees of freeness and or price points. So there are a number of options available, and it will increasingly become, I think, part of the process, where in the same way that it will for anything that's got a strong kind of narrative creation aspect to it, I think AI will have a part to play, and I think that will significantly increase. There are some pretty sophisticated tools out there already, but they're nowhere near at a point where this is just going to, you can just give it some instructions and it's going to produce fully fledged answers that just don't work like that. But maybe 5-10 years down the line it might do. Resources there. Importantly, like I said, guys, you're going to get the templates come through to you in the next couple of days, as well as the recording of the webinar, so you can go and review in your own time. Do spend some time looking at the templates, making sure you're familiar with them. If you've got concerns or issues, then feel free to reach out to me. If anyone just wants to carry on the conversation and you want to talk a little bit more detail about the application within your own organization, how it works, what you might be looking for, difficulties you're having, if you want some extra support, always happy to have open conversations with no pressure to sort of engage with any paid services at all. Email addresses are up on the screen here. andrew.watson@proactus.com is my direct, obviously, and the telephone number there as well. I think we're on time. I don't know how we managed to finish on time. I'm sorry I didn't get through enough questions. There were hundreds, but hopefully you can take some value. And anyone that attended, like I say, you will get the slides and also the templates sent out to you in the coming days. If you need me, reach out to me and we will try and just make a contact and see how everyone's feeling about this afterwards as well. Thank you very, very much for your attention. It's been a bumper record-breaking crowd on the webinar this morning. I really hope I was able to add some value for you. I know we went through things at a pace because we wanted to go through 3 or 4 templates and really give them to you. So I hope you can take some things away from it. Hope it's giving you some food for thought. And you can think about how to incorporate them and use them within your bidding work going forward in the future. And like I say, if you do need or want to reach out and have a conversation, please do reach out to me. Always happy to chat to people out in the field on the coal face working away, and we love to support people wherever possible as well. Thank you very much for your attention, for your hour. That's us out of time. I really do appreciate it, and I hope to see you at the next webinar. Wishing you all the best for the rest of the day and the rest of the week. Thank you so much, guys. All the best. Bye for now.